When you start doing better in life, people rarely say anything directly. It shows up in small ways, a different tone, a strange joke, a conversation that suddenly feels careful. Someone starts explaining their situation more than before. Someone else becomes quieter around you. Nothing dramatic happens, but something shifts. Most people think success changes personality. What actually changes is position. When your life improves, people quietly start measuring themselves differently next to you. Some feel motivated, some feel uncomfortable, some slowly create distance. Because improvement doesn't just change your life, it changes where you stand in the social hierarchy around you. The first place this usually becomes visible is not in success. It appears in reaction. You mention a promotion and someone immediately mentions how expensive everything is. You talk about a new opportunity and someone jokes that you are becoming unreachable. You offer to pay for something and suddenly the mood changes. Someone insists they will cover their part, even if they struggle. Someone else becomes unusually quiet. Nobody says they feel uncomfortable, but people start adjusting how they stand next to you. Because money does something most people never admit. It quietly signals who is becoming stable and who is still exposed. And stability changes how groups organize themselves. The person with more options slowly becomes the reference point, not by choice, by position. People start watching what you can afford, what you tolerate, what you refuse, even what risks you can survive. Because financial improvement does not just increase comfort, it increases your ability to absorb pressure. And the moment someone can absorb more pressure, the group begins assigning them more invisible responsibility. You become the backup plan, the reliable one, the one who can handle it, even if nobody asks your permission. Requests become indirect, expectations become silent, and small financial differences start turning into social gravity. This is where the circle begins to change, not because people dislike progress, but because progress quietly reveals who is safe and who is not. And safety always reorganizes the room. The person seen as safest slowly stops being seen as equal, and that is where distance quietly begins. Most people believe friendships are built on personality, humor, history, loyalty. But underneath those bonds sits something older that most people never question: early conditioning about where they belong. From childhood, people learn to recognize who has more and who has less, who gets help, who gives help, who waits, who decides. These patterns form long before anyone talks about income. They form when one child has more security than another, when one family has less stress than another, when one person learns stability and another learns uncertainty. As adults, these patterns do not disappear. They just become harder to see. When someone in a social circle starts doing better, the other's nervous system does not see success first. It sees contrast. Contrast asks a silent question: where do I stand now? Am I moving forward too? Am I falling behind? Am I still equal here? Most people never say these questions, but their behavior starts answering them anyway. Some people try to match your progress, some try to dismiss it. Some create psychological distance to reduce pressure comparison, because comparison activates the same survival wiring as scarcity. Not logically, emotionally. The brain prefers environments where position feels predictable, where nobody suddenly moves ahead, because sudden movement forces everyone else to reassess their own safety. This is why improvement sometimes creates discomfort instead of celebration. It introduces uncertainty into positions people thought were stable. And when stability feels threatened, the nervous system does what it always does. It protects identity first, even if that means slowly stepping away from someone who reminds you that change is possible. There's another pressure most people never notice when they start doing better. It is not pressure from others, it's pressure from loyalty. Every social circle forms an unspoken agreement about what is normal: how much people earn, how much they struggle, how much they tolerate, how much they risk. These norms create emotional safety because nobody feels out of place. But when one person starts improving, they quietly step outside that agreement. not intentionally, but visibly, and this creates identity tension on both sides. The person improving may feel they have to explain themselves more, downplay progress, hide upgrades, speak carefully about change, because standing out financially can feel like a breaking an unspoken loyalty contract. At the same time, the group may feel that something familiar is being left behind, not the person, the shared identity, the version of reality where everyone stood on similar ground. This is why some people experience guilt when their life improves, not because success is wrong, but because humans are wired to protect belonging, and belonging often depends on similarity. The more visible the difference becomes, the harder it becomes to pretend nothing changed. Some friendships survive this shift by redefining themselves. Others survive by pretending nothing happened. And some slowly fade because neither side knows how to resolve the distance between who they were together and who they are becoming now. At some point, the change stops being subtle and starts becoming structural. Plans start organizing around different budgets. Risk tolerance starts separating. One person can quit a bad situation, another cannot. One person can say no, another has to tolerate more. These differences create invisible decision power. Not loud power, quiet power. The power of optionality. The person with the most financial flexibility slowly gains something most groups never discuss: the ability to choose participation. When you can choose whether to join, whether to stay, whether to leave, your position automatically changes, not because you demand control, but because choice itself creates gravity. People begin adjusting around the person with the most flexibility. Sometimes they expect leadership, sometimes they expect contribution, sometimes they expect emotional strength, because groups naturally reorganize around whoever has the most room to move. At the same time, conversations begin filtering themselves. Some people stop sharing certain struggles, some stop suggesting certain activities, some begin assuming you wouldn't understand their constraints anymore, even if nothing about your personality changed. Because once financial paths separate, reference points begin disappearing, and without reference points, relationships require more effort to maintain the same feeling of equality. This is where most people start noticing the real shift, not in one dramatic moment, but what slowly stops happening. Fewer spontaneous invitations, fewer unplanned conversations, fewer situations where everyone feels equally relaxed. You may still be included, but differently, more formally, more carefully, sometimes only when plans match your assumed lifestyle, other times only when your presence feels useful. Because once financial differences become visible, people start predicting behavior. They assume what you would enjoy, what you would refuse, what you have outgrown, even if they're wrong. These assumptions slowly narrow how others interact with you, and they also narrow how you interact with them. You might start editing what you say, avoiding certain topics, downplaying progress, or separating parts of your life to avoid friction. Not because you want distance, but because maintaining equality starts requiring management, and relationships that once felt natural start requiring calibration. This is how circles shrink without conflict, not through arguments, through adjustment, through prediction, through silent repositioning. Nobody announces distance, but everyone slowly begins standing where the new hierarchy makes sense. Most people think their circle shrinks because they changed, but most of the time, they did not change, their position did. And once your position changes, the room quietly reorganizes around you. Some people move closer, some people move away. Some stay, but stand differently. And most people never realize the real cost of doing better is not effort, it's that you can never fully return to the position you used to occupy.